Hi, my name is Aimee Bristow. I'm the Associate Vice President of Enrollment Management and Financial Aid at Westminster College. Been at the college for 23 years, so I have overseen the financial aid process during my time here at Westminster. I'm sorry you're not able to join us on campus for Soar, but I wanted to share the information with you. I know finances plays a big role for families as they're preparing to send their child off to college, and so it can be a little confusing and seem a little overwhelming. And so the purpose of this session is to simply walk you through the process and paperwork that still may be remaining that your student needs to complete before they move into Westminster in August. And so we just want to make sure that you understand what paperwork is required, what processes, what time frame, and then we're going to talk about billing. I know billing is not anyone's favorite subject when it comes to preparing to send your child to college, but it is one of the necessary aspects of college, and again, it can be a confusing process, so want to cover that. If you were here with us on campus, this would be a joint presentation between myself and our Accounts Receivable Coordinator, Lisa McIntyre, but today I'm going to cover both. But if you have questions before you arrive or while your student is here, then feel free to either contact myself regarding financial aid or Lisa in the business office in regards to billing specifically. As I go through this information, it is referencing a PowerPoint presentation that you can follow along with as you watch the video, and at the end of the presentation it is going to give contact information for myself and for Lisa, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Please know that we are here at any point that you have questions. We want to make sure that you're not struggling and getting frustrated at home, that just simply reach out to us and ask any questions that you might have so that we can guide you through the process and eliminate any of those barriers that you might be experiencing as you go along. Specifically in regards to financial aid, the first step of the financial aid process is to complete the FAFSA application. You might be watching this video and you haven't completed the FAFSA yet, and I want to reassure you that it's not too late to file the FAFSA application for the upcoming school year. So if you haven't and you're still wondering how you're going to cover the remaining cost for your child to attend Westminster, I do encourage you to go ahead and complete the FAFSA application so that we can determine if there's additional forms of financial aid, grants, work programs, student loans that your student might qualify for that might be able to reduce the financial burden that your family is facing to cover when your student enrolls at Westminster. I also want to remind you that the FAFSA is a process that students have to complete each year that they are in college. So unlike when they apply for admission, where they simply have to apply at the time that they are enrolling, they don't have to go back through the admissions office to return the following semester or the following academic year. The FAFSA process, however, they do have to complete each academic year. If you've gone through the FAFSA, you know that it does reference financial information and family information at a particular point in time. And as we all know, our family situations change, finances can change, family dynamics can change, and so that's why the Department of Education requires students to complete the FAFSA each academic year that they are going to be enrolled so that we can determine that eligibility for financial aid on an academic year basis. Just as a reminder, we use the same priority deadline for FAFSA completion for our current students as we do for our incoming students. So we want to remind you that it will be time to complete the FAFSA by November 15th this fall. So that means right about the time that your student is having their first set of midterm exams here at Westminster, it'll be time to start thinking about completing the FAFSA application for the upcoming school year. We'll send out emails and postcards to remind you of that, but want to just put that date on your radar so that you can remember to complete the FAFSA application so your child doesn't miss out on any financial aid awards that they would be eligible to receive when they choose to return their sophomore year. Once a student completes the FAFSA application, the Department of Education is going to select some of those FAFSA applications for verification. That's simply just an audit of the FAFSA application to ensure that the information that is on the FAFSA, which is used to determine your child's eligibility for financial aid, is accurate. We want to make sure, and the Department of Education wants to make sure, that the dollars that are funded by the federal government and the state of Missouri for those students who are residents of Missouri is going to the students that it is intended to go to. So the verification process just simply ensures that the information used to determine that eligibility is accurate. At least 1/3 of all students will be selected for the verification process, which means many of you may not even need to be concerned about the verification. Some students will be selected for verification each year that they're in college. Some students will never be selected for verification when they complete their FAFSA. At the time that you complete your FAFSA application, you will be notified by the Department of Education if you are selected for verification, and you will receive information from our office to confirm which additional documentation you need to submit to us in order for us to complete the verification process. For those of you who have not submitted your verification documents, I do want to remind you to submit that as soon as you can. And our deadline for students who will be enrolling with us in the fall is to have your verification documents submitted no later than August 1st. Please remember that until the verification has been completed, financial aid is simply estimated. So we cannot finalize financial aid, we cannot request disbursements, and we cannot pass that information on to the billing office until the verification process has been completed. What kinds of documents might we be looking at? One thing that we require of every student selected for verification is a verification worksheet. This worksheet has been mailed to your students probably multiple times to the home permanent address. It needs to be completed by the student, but it also has to be signed by the parent. So if that document has not been returned, I encourage you to submit that back to us as quickly as possible. When you complete the FAFSA application, you have the option to link to the IRS to transfer in your income tax information directly from the IRS into the FAFSA application. Some families choose not to use this function in the FAFSA. Others are not eligible due to federal regulations and special family situations. So we may require that you submit what's called a tax return transcript. That's an official document that a tax filer has to request from the IRS, and they will mail that document to the taxpayer, and then you will provide a copy of that to our office. If you have not filed an income tax return for the respective year that we're referencing, which for students enrolling for the 2021 academic year, we're referencing the 2018 federal income tax information. If you have not filed a 2018 federal income tax return yet, you will not be eligible to request a tax return transcript. The tax return transcript is a document which is free, and you do have to request that. We are not allowed to accept a copy of the tax return as an acceptable document, so you do have to request the tax return transcript from the IRS if you are not eligible or you choose not to link to the IRS as part of the FAFSA application. We may also request copies of W-2 forms. So again, the documentation that is requested is going to be specific to the student. So when we send out the verification worksheet, we will also have sent the list of documents that are required for your student to complete verification. So please refer to the documentation that we have sent to your student to know specifically what documents are required for your student to complete verification. Every student who files a FAFSA application is eligible to borrow the federal direct Stafford loan. This is your traditional student loan. The loan is in the student's name. The student has 100% legal responsibility for repaying that loan. It is not a secured loan. It is not a co-signed loan. So the only person responsible for that loan is the student. If the student chooses to accept this loan eligibility, then there is additional documentation that they must complete to accept it. So when we mail out the financial aid letter to your student, it will reference a federal direct subsidized and or unsubsidized Stafford loan that your student is eligible to borrow. As an incoming freshman, the student is limited to borrow no more than $5,500 for the academic year. Student is not required to borrow the maximum amount should they choose to borrow. They will be eligible to request a reduced amount if they don't need the maximum amount. Keep in mind that whatever amount your student borrows while they're in college, they will have to repay that loan once they get out of college. So trying to only borrow what is needed to be a responsible borrower and reduce the repayment once they get out of college. When a student chooses to accept the loan, there are 2 forms that they have to complete in order as a very first time borrower. So they have to complete what's called a loan agreement. This is the legally binding agreement. And so the student completes the loan agreement, which is called a master promissory note with the Department of Education. The information is available on the Finances tab in MyWC. They will link to a website at the Department of Education where they will need to log in using their FSA ID. Parents, I know it's difficult sometimes to get your students to complete paperwork in the time frame that we would want them to complete paperwork. Completely understand where you, as a parent, may sit with that. I too have a college student and understand that his time frame in completing paperwork doesn't necessarily fit into my time frame for when I would want him to complete his paperwork. But I do want to remind you that these Stafford loans are your students' loans. So while you may be tempted to complete the paperwork on behalf of your student, just to check that off the list, I do encourage you to have your students fill it out because they are the ones who are incurring the debt and they are the ones who are responsible for repaying the debt. So please sit with your student if necessary, or encourage your student to sit down and spend some time completing the paperwork. They will log into the Department of Education website with their FSA ID, which is what they use to complete their FAFSA application. And once they are logged in, then they will complete several steps on that page. As I said, one step is the loan agreement, which is the master promissory note. Another step on that website is entrance counseling. Entrance counseling is a way for the student to go through their rights and responsibilities as a Stafford loan borrower. It's set up in somewhat of a quiz format, so the student will read some information about the Stafford loan program and answer some true, false, and multiple choice questions. This process is simply to ensure that they understand their rights and responsibilities as a Stafford loan borrower. First and foremost, we want to make sure that the student doesn't complete the paperwork without realizing the responsibility that they are assuming and the fact that this is a loan and they are committing to repay the loan once they get out of college. So if they don't get anything else out of the entrance counseling and the paperwork, we want to ensure that they do understand that they are incurring debt and they are committing to the responsibility to repay that. Once a student completes the paperwork, the college will complete enrollment verification for that student with the Department of Education. There will be a final step through the Department of Education that the student has to complete, which is called Informed Borrower Confirmation. Again, it's on the Department of Education website, and the student will use the FSA ID to log in, but that is just an additional confirmation that the student definitely wants to borrow the money. Again, reminding them that this is debt and the importance of accepting the responsibility. All three of those steps are completed at the beginning when they're borrowing for the first time. A final document that we require our students to complete is actually an internal document. It's called a Federal Direct Stafford Loan Data Sheet. It's located on the Finances tab in MyWC, and that's a document that the student will complete with Westminster each year that they're in school. The purpose of this document is to provide affirmative confirmation to the college that they definitely want to borrow the money, and this is where they reference the amount that they wish to borrow. Again, I mentioned that if a student doesn't want to borrow the maximum that they're eligible to borrow, they can let us know that there's a reduced amount that they choose to borrow. And this is where they would indicate the reduced amount, is on the Federal Direct Stafford Loan Data Sheet, which is where they will indicate the requested loan amount. Of course, they are always eligible to borrow the maximum, but not required to borrow the maximum, keeping in mind whatever they borrow, they always have to repay. Parents, don't fret. The Department of Education hasn't left you out. So in addition to students having the option to borrow through the Federal Direct Stafford Loan Program, there is an option for parents through the Department of Education to borrow a loan in their parent's name for the purpose of your child's educational expenses. This loan is called the Federal Direct Plus Loan, which is a parent loan for undergraduate students. Parents will submit a loan agreement application through the Department of Education's website. This time, you log in as yourself using your FSA ID that you use to sign as the parent your student's FAFSA application. So the parent logs into the federal website, they will complete the loan agreement, and they will complete the application for the Parent Plus loan. The Plus loan is a credit-based loan that allows parents to borrow money for the purpose of their child's educational expenses. So the credit check has to be completed by the Department of Education each year that this parent wants to borrow the Federal Direct Plus loan. This information is strictly confidential between the parent applicant and the Department of Education. The only information that is passed on to the college is the credit decision. So the Department of Education will notify the college if the loan is approved or not approved, but we do not have access to your credit report. Therefore, we cannot tell you why the loan was not approved if that is the decision of the Department of Education. They will notify you of that information, but that information is not provided to the college. Unlike the student, where they are limited to borrow a specific amount based upon their grade level, parents are allowed by the Department of Education to borrow the amount that is needed to cover their outstanding balance for their student's account. So parents have the option to request a specific amount, or they can indicate on their loan application process that they wish to borrow the maximum amount that they're eligible for. The maximum amount is based upon the total cost of attendance minus what your student is receiving in financial aid, and that difference can be borrowed through the Federal Direct Plus loan. That can include the exact amount of your outstanding balance. It can also include an estimate for the cost of textbooks. If you're not aware, textbooks is something that students do have to purchase. You may recall that typically while your child is in school, elementary, high school, textbooks are provided and your students don't have to pay for those when they go to school. Once they come to college, that is different. Students are responsible for purchasing their own textbooks. That expense can range anywhere from $500 to $600 per semester. And I can attest to the fact that some semesters, while my child has been in college, we have maybe only spent $300. And other semesters I have spent $600 to $700 per semester, depending on which courses the student is enrolled in, what the required textbooks are for that respective course. So keeping in mind that that is going to vary from year to year, but that is an additional expense that the student and family needs to be prepared to purchase each academic semester that they're going to be enrolled. Again, that cost can be rolled into the Plus loan should you choose to do that, or you can simply pay for those textbooks as they are purchased. You also have the option to increase the Plus loan amount to cover some personal expenses. We all know that just because our child is away at college, living on college campus, doesn't mean that all the expenses at home respective to that child go away. I can assure you that I'm still paying a cell phone bill, I'm still paying auto insurance, health insurance. So even though my son is not living under my roof for 9 to 10 months out of the year, I still have to maintain those expenses. And so some families will choose to include similar costs to that in the Plus loan so that there is that as a resource to help you cover some personal expenses. It might be a plane ticket. Maybe your child is from Texas and you have to fly your student to Fulton. And you may have to buy a plane ticket, and you may want to include that in the cost of the Plus loan. So it depends on the individual family whether you want to include some cost for personal expenses or not, but that is definitely an allowable option by the Department of Education. When you're referring to the PowerPoint presentation that's tied to this presentation, it does reference the specific website that I'm referring to, which is studentaid.gov. And that is the same website that the students complete their Stafford loan paperwork, and that is also the website that the parents would apply for the Federal Direct Plus loan. Depending upon a student's eligibility, when you receive the financial aid award letter, some of the students are eligible for the Federal Work Study Program. If your student is eligible for the Work Study Program, that is an opportunity for them to take a part-time job here on our college campus while they're enrolled. It's not a program that they're going to get rich. They're usually working anywhere from 5 to 7 hours per week, making minimum wage, but it does provide an opportunity for them to work a few hours on campus where they can earn some money that they can either use to help cover their outstanding balance on their bill, or they can use that to cover spending money. Again, just because a student is living on campus and eating in the dining hall doesn't mean that they don't have personal expenses. My son takes a car to college, and so he has to put gas in. He still has to purchase his bathroom supplies and some personal items and things of that nature. And so whether you're going to provide the funding for that in order for them to cover those miscellaneous personal expenses while they're at school, or they can use their work-study paycheck to cover those expenses. Definitely a family discussion. If you haven't already talked about whether your student is planning to participate in the federal work-study program, I encourage you to have that conversation at home before your student comes to college. If you're expecting your student to work, your student needs to understand that. If you're expecting your student to provide that apply the paycheck to their outstanding balance, they need to understand that as well. So it definitely needs to be a family conversation. And so I encourage you to sit down and talk to your student before they come to campus. For those students who choose to work, once they arrive on campus, they will work with Human Resources here on campus to complete the onboarding paperwork. It is a real part-time job, so they are required to complete their personnel forms just like any other part-time job that they may have had while attending high school. So Human Resources will work with them to complete their I-9 and W-4 forms. Associated with that paperwork is the copies of documentation for their identification. One of those is the Human Resource Office is going to want to see a copy of the Social Security card for the student. Due to identity theft, many of our students don't come to campus with a Social Security card. As a parent, I would recommend that you consider bringing the Social Security card to campus when you move your student in August. Human Resources will be available on move-in days. They can make a photocopy on site of the Social Security card, and then you can take it back home with you and put it in your safekeeping wherever you keep that type of documentation at home, as opposed to your student carrying it around in their wallet or keeping it in their residence hall room here on campus. So just know that they will have to do that. As a real part-time job, please also note that the college will issue a W-2 form to them in January, just like any other part-time job. So if your student is required to complete an income tax return, they will include their work-study W-2 form along with any other W-2s that they have when they complete their income tax filing form. Our payroll happens twice a month, so students are paid around the 15th and the last working day of the month for the hours that they work. Again, if they don't work enough hours to earn the maximum amount that they're eligible to receive, then they're only going to be paid for the hours that they worked. So if they're coming up short, they might work with their supervisor to see if they can change their schedule and pick up a few more hours so that they can earn the amount that they're allowed to. Around the time of graduation, many high schools are going to hold their scholarship award nights, things of that nature. So if your students have been notified that they're receiving a privately funded scholarship, please pass that information on to us in the financial aid office. We have to incorporate that into your students' financial aid to ensure that their financial aid eligibility is still within federal regulations. So as soon as your student is notified that they're receiving a private scholarship, please notify our office of one, who the donor is, who is funding that particular scholarship, so that we can make note of that. We'd like to know how much the scholarship is, and it's helpful for us, and it's also helpful for you to know how they plan to disperse it. So for example, if your student is awarded a $1,000 private scholarship from the Optimist Club in your community, it's helpful for you to know, are they going to disperse that $1,000 all at once at the beginning of the fall semester, or will they disperse $500 at the beginning of the fall semester and another $500 at the beginning of the spring semester? Why is that important? Because we only bill you one semester at a time. So if the scholarship comes in and it's fully applied to the fall semester, then you'll need to make some financial planning arrangements for your family to keep in mind that the spring semester balance is going to be higher than it was for the fall semester if there is not going to be a private scholarship disbursement received for the spring semester. So while it's helpful for us, it's really helpful for you for that financial planning, just to kind of keep that in mind. In regards to billing, so billing is the next phase. It's managed out of our business office. Lisa McIntyre is our accounts receivable coordinator, and she oversees the billing process. Westminster does billing electronically, and that information is housed in MyWC, so we will not mail you a paper bill. When the billing is generated, your student will receive an email to their Westminster email. So if they haven't transitioned into using and reading their Westminster email, I encourage them to start checking their Westminster email, because once they are registered, then that's when the other administrative offices on campus are going to start communicating with them And our number one form of communication here at Westminster is our Westminster email. So while the admissions office has been communicating with your student at their personal email during the admissions process, the rest of the campus will only communicate with your student through the Westminster email, and that includes billing information. So the first billing statement for the fall semester will be generated by June 1st. Your student will receive an email at their Westminster email notifying them that the billing statement is available for them to view and download in MyWC on the Finances tab. One of the functions that will become available at that time is the option for your student to sign up for the parents to have access to billing. Parents, I know that while your child has been in high school, you've had access to all information that you want information. You want to know how much money is in your student's lunch account, you have access to that. You want to know if they had any disciplinary fines, what their schedule is, have they been tardy. All of that information is available to you when your student is in high school. That information is no longer available to you once your child enters college. So if you want to have your own access for billing information, your student will need to set you up with a parent PIN, which is a function in the billing section on the Finances tab of MyWC. The payment for the fall semester is due by August 1st. We will bill again in November for the spring semester, and the spring semester payment is due by January 1st. Failure to pay the bill could result in your child being dropped from their classes. So it's important to make note of those due dates so that your child doesn't run into any registration difficulties in regards to that respective semester that they're going to be enrolled at Westminster. Payments can be made to Westminster by cash, check, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or American Express. Please note that if you are planning to pay by credit card, Westminster does assess a 2.75% convenience fee for you to use your credit card. If you choose to pay electronically using an e-check, there is no convenience fee assessed for that. In the student account portal, like I said, the student can access their billing statements. They can sign up for monthly payment plans. If a student plans to sign up for the payment plan, we offer a 5-month payment plan per semester. So a 5-month payment plan for the fall semester, that would start July 1 and run through November 1, and then a 5-month payment plan for the spring semester would begin December 1st and run through April 1st. There is a semester enrollment fee of $60 to sign up for the payment plan, and then you can evenly distribute your payments over a 5-month period of time each semester at no additional cost. So you have the option to make a lump sum payment at the beginning of the semester to pay that semester balance in full, or you have the option to sign up for the payment plan. If you're planning to sign up for the payment plan, then the payment in full deadline is irrelevant because you're going to be submitting payments on a monthly basis. So families usually choose one of 3 options to pay the balance. They pay in full by the beginning of the semester, they do a monthly payment plan, or they borrow the money, either through additional student loans or through the parent loan. Some of you may be using your 529 plan to pay the balance, and that's perfectly fine, but that would be coming in a lump sum, and that would be due by the due date. So for those of you who are going to be using a 529 for the fall semester, we do ask that that payment be received by August 1st, prior to the beginning of this fall semester. One thing that all of our students are going to see on their billing statement is a parking fee. It's $25 per semester assessed to all students. If your student is not going to have a car while attending Westminster, part of the new student checklist does provide them the option to complete a parking fee waiver. And that parking fee waiver must be completed by the end of August to have that $25 parking fee removed from the fall semester billing statement. The parking fee waiver must be completed each academic year to confirm that the student is not going to have a car on campus. If the student's plans change and they do bring a car to campus, they do need to register that car as soon as they bring it to campus so that we can provide them with a parking tag for their car to confirm that they are eligible to park on campus, and also to add that $25 charge to their billing statement. Another cost that students will see on their billing statement is a charge for health insurance. So Westminster has a policy which requires all of our students to have a health insurance policy. Most of the students that we see have a health insurance policy covered by their parents, and that fulfills our requirement. Those students who do not have their own health insurance, Westminster will purchase a health insurance policy on behalf of the student, and the premium will be added to their billing statement each semester to cover the cost of that health insurance policy. Costs have not been established at this time for the 2020-21 academic year, but you can expect those premiums to be determined by the beginning of the summer, and that information will be communicated to you by the Wellness Center. To give you an example, the cost for the 2019-20 academic year is $835 for the fall semester, and it was $898 for the spring semester. Why is it more expensive during the spring? Because it covers the spring semester as well as the summer. So the health insurance policy that the college provides to those students who don't have their own health insurance does cover a full 12 months. So even though they may be home during the summer, they will still have health insurance coverage during that period of time. In order for us to know which students need to be signed up for the health insurance program, students who have their own health insurance will be asked to complete a health insurance waiver. This is where you simply will confirm what health insurance you have. So the student will reference their health insurance card to provide us with information regarding their health insurance policy. That is how we validate that the student has their own health insurance. Those students who are not able to complete the waiver will be signed up for the health insurance, and that will be added to their bill. The deadline for students to complete the health insurance waiver will be August 31st for the fall semester. This has to be completed once each academic year for those students who do have their own health insurance. Every student who enrolls at Westminster is required to pay a $200 deposit before they can register for courses. You will not see the $200 as a prepayment on account. That deposit is held in a holding account as long as the student is enrolled at Westminster. Once the student ceases to be enrolled, that deposit is refunded back to the student account. If there are no final charges on the account, the $200 will be refunded fully back to the student. For students who have paid a deposit, please note that it is not refundable after May 1st. So if a student has paid a deposit and some of their plans change and they are unable to enroll at Westminster, then if they make that decision prior to May 1, the deposit is refundable. If they make that decision after May 1, the deposit is no longer refundable. Please know that if you do not pay your balance in full each semester, the business office will assess a finance charge, which is 1.5% per month on any unpaid balance. If the unpaid balance carries forward to the point where it's time for the student to register for the upcoming semester, please note that the student will be prevented from registering for the next semester if their balance has not been paid in full. So it is important that students and parents pay attention to the billing statements, pay attention to the due dates, and make arrangements. Otherwise, the student will not be allowed to continue for the following semester here at Westminster. I mentioned earlier that parents have the option to borrow extra money on their PLUS loan if they're choosing to take out a PLUS loan to cover the cost of books. For those students whose financial aid exceeds the charges for the respective semester and it's going to create a credit on their account, the student will have the option to charge their books towards their student account through our campus bookstore. If a student does not have a credit on their account, the student will have to make arrangements to pay either cash or credit to purchase their books through the bookstore. On the new student checklist, your student may have completed a document which is called the FERPA form. The FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. As I mentioned earlier, when our children are in high school and elementary school, if there's any information that we want about our student accounts or anything about what's happening with them at school, we have access to that. If we want to email the principal and ask a question, we can. If we want to email the counselor or make an appointment with the high school counselor, we have the option to do that. And any questions that we ask that pertains to our student, they're going to answer that information and provide the information that we're requesting. Once your student enrolls in college, the FERPA law protects the privacy of the student. So the access goes from full access to no access for parents. So parents, you no longer have access to any of that information. If you are going to be involved with your student and your student wants you to have the ability to talk with us in the financial aid office, to talk with the business office about your bill, to ask about your grades, the student has to sign a release giving permission for us to speak with a particular individual. This FERPA release form is part of the new student checklist. We can't require that the student complete the FERPA form, but as a parent, you can require that. And I can assure you that, again, that's another conversation that I would encourage you to have at home. My son and I have talked about that, and if he doesn't give me permission to access that information, then I might not be willing to pay the bill. If I'm going to be assisting with the finances, then I want to know, are you going to class? What are your grades? As a parent, I sign up for the monthly payment for my particular son, and so I need to be able to get in and set up those payment arrangements, and I need to be able to make those monthly payments. So I have to have access to that information. So it's helpful, but definitely we can't require that. But without the student completing the FERPA form, then you can call our office and we can answer general questions, but we cannot answer specific questions about how much financial aid eligibility your student has. Has your student completed loan paperwork? Has your student completed verification? How much is the bill? How much is owed on the bill? Have you received a payment on the bill? Any of those kind of questions we're not able to answer unless your student has completed the FERPA release form. So I do recommend that you double check with your student and just confirm whether they have completed that, and again, have that conversation at home if they haven't completed that document, so you know whether or not you're going to have access to that specific information. I recognize that this is a lot of information. I know that again, the financial aid process and the billing process can be confusing and overwhelming, and I just want to remind you that we're here. So anything that we can do to assist you, please don't hesitate to contact the financial aid office, to contact the business office. We want to make the process as easy as possible for you. So if you need to know what documents have been completed, if you need to know what's left for your student to do, if you need to know how much money is owed, if you need to know that information and your student has completed the release form, please contact our office and we will be happy to assist you with that. Again, on the last slide of the PowerPoint, it does have phone number and email address for myself and for Lisa McIntyre in the business office. We look forward to having your student here on campus with us, and if you're going to move your student in, I look forward to meeting you and working with you over the next 4 years while your student is enrolled here at Westminster. Please let us know if there's anything that we can do. Have a great day. Thank you so much.